Welcome, boys and girls. Costin here with a discussion about the Tides of Torment DLC, as well as some of the things that Creative Assembly could learn from Balthazar Gelt's campaign. Both the things that work extremely well in Gelt's campaign and some of the more questionable stuff. Now, the reason I'm doing these kind of videos right now is because there's still several weeks before the DLC comes out, and there's still plenty of time to improve things, fix things, and so on and so forth. And suffice to say, based on what Creative Assembly has revealed publicly, be it the Steam pages, the blogs, the videos that they've done, there are some very questionable things about Tides of Torment. It is not a great idea, from my view, to wait until a DLC comes out or a game comes out and then say, oh, this is an issue, you should have fixed it. Well, if you see an issue before a game comes out, you should mention it before it comes out, or a DLC comes out, not wait until it happens. And I am certainly seeing quite a few issues with regards to Tides of Torment. The limited nature of the campaigns, and also really when we think about Dekala, for instance. She's going to start right here in the Hidden Landing. That's what CA has stated publicly. It's on her Steam page. I don't know where Sale is going to start. I know where Aislinn is going to start, and Aislinn is going to start right about here somewhere. So that is what is worth talking about right now with regards to some of the more questionable things about what we're seeing from Creative Assembly, like anything that they've stated publicly. So let's take a look at Gelt. Here's one of the problems he has, the jungle. And this is a point that I want to highlight because it is going to affect Dekala, I imagine. And the problem with the jungle is the movement speed. And in fact, one of the things that does hurt Gelt's entire campaign is this province, the Great Canal, and actually everything beyond that. So the Serpent Estuary, just in general, this entire campaign area. And it doesn't just affect Gelt. It affects Nakai, for instance. It affects Lokir if he goes all the way here. It affects Xiaoming if he goes over here. Is the problem that jungle is slower to navigate through, even if the climate is suitable in your campaign. Maybe it should be the case that if you do have suitable jungle climate in your campaign, you can navigate it faster. Maybe that's just an idea in general of climate, that if you do have it suitable, it's easier to navigate. If you don't have it suitable, it's harder to navigate. That would genuinely be a much better climate debuff than the current situation we got, which affects settlements but doesn't necessarily affect movement range. Just worth pointing out a specific subject out. Of course, there's downsides with that specific subject, but one of the things that Creative Assembly has shown with Tides of Torment, be it Steam pages, videos, blogs, is that we are going to have limitations. One of those limitations that we've seen with Aislinn is with the consult leaders mechanic, because in their blog on the subject they show a cooldown for consulting leaders. Now it's unclear exactly how it will work specifically, but my read on it, and my entire job as a YouTuber, is recognizing how things are going to shape up. But my read on it is we will be able to consult one of these leaders every 8-10 turns or so, give or take, and get some kind of benefit. Now the problem with that system is that when you have just one leader you can consult, then you start realizing very quickly that one of them is, or two of them are just going to be much, much better than the others. We don't know which one that will be. Could be Alariel, could be Imrik, could be Ali Fanar, could be Tyrion, could be Teclis, it doesn't matter. But if you have a mechanic in the game that just basically screams around the idea, oh, you get choice, but then the choice ends up being fluff because one is better than the others, then that's just bloat in the game. And it's also a problem from a different perspective. Because obviously if you're someone who understands the game, you'll figure out very quickly which one you should go for. But if you're someone who's new to the game, picking up, or you haven't really spent that much time in Warhammer 3, then you'll make a choice thinking it's a reasonable one, because like all these choices supposedly are equal, right? And all of them are valuable, but then you'll make the wrong choice and you'll end up limiting your own campaign. That is the problem that I see with that system. On top of that, limiting buildings based on technology is a really crappy system for the same reason. Either because there's a really good choice that everyone has an understanding of the game will always pick once they figure out, maybe, try a couple of times and then figure out, okay, this is the one I always want to go for. So that choice ends up being completely pointless, because that's what seemingly they're going to do with Aceland. It's not really technology, but it more or less acts as a technology tree, similar to how the Kislev supporters ended up being a technology tree. So choices for the sake of saying you have choices, pointless. It's all about balance. It's about implementation. It's about pacing. When we talk about pacing, it's when are things available in a campaign? Are there actually meaningful choices that do work well? And this is the thing about the Empire. The Empire does offer inherently a good amount of different choices. Because here's what the Empire does extremely well. You have infantry, ranged artillery, warrior priests, cavalry, and magic available in your settlements from tier 2. These are a lot of different choices from tier 2. You even have choices from tier 1 between shooting range and the training field. These are genuine choices. And what's great about this is each of these choices can work out very, very well in different ways. You can go pure infantry. It's not the best choice, to be clear, but you do get at least spearmen with shields, and you do get crossbowmen. It's not a bad choice. You can go outriders and pistoliers and get witch hunters. So you can either get a captain or a witch hunter. Realistically, you can just build a barracks, get your captain, get a couple of units, and then destroy that building, and then get the firearms academy. But it is a choice. Similar to warrior priests, similar to cavalry, similar to engineers. This is how you do choices in a real way. You give the player a bunch of different options, and it's similar, by the way, for the dwarves. This is the reason Thrones of Decay is the best DLC that Creative Assembly ever released, because it gives you a lot of real choices. It doesn't limit things based on technology. It doesn't limit it based on a meter. It gives you choices from the very beginning of the campaign, and then those choices continue throughout the course of the campaign with regards to higher tier units. Again, this is why TOD is amazing, and the Empire is not as good as the Dwarves, because the Dwarves are even better in this respect. Now, of course, it's not all perfect, because you then have some questionable things with research, like, oh, let me spend several turns researching an extra hero capacity in a campaign. And then you also have the problem of, like, victory conditions, which give you hero capacity for +3 for all heroes once you achieve, occupying, looting, raising, or sacking 30 different settlements. That means you get a ton of heroes all at once, so that choice ends up neutering itself. You don't need that +3 hero capacity because you have a lot of hero capacity as the Empire. We'll see about the High Elves on this subject. Currently, the problem with High Elves is the fact that it actually works in the worst way. You have limited choices in a campaign, and then you get a bunch of shit all at once. But by the time you get a bunch of shit all at once, you've won your short campaign victory condition. You suddenly get 4 heroes of each type all at once. It isn't a great dynamic, Creative Assembly. So that's the Empire High Elves. But what about Gelt? What does Gelt do very well? What he does poorly is dealing with the jungle, and I would not be surprised if that ruins the Kalas campaign. Just the climate alone. You can't just put a legendary lord in a location of the map and ignore the dynamics that exist in that location of the map, CA. You've done it with Omens of Destruction. It didn't go so well. In fact, one of the reasons Thrones of Decay ended up being so great is because they actually put Malachi in a position where it really worked. And guess what? It's the most played campaign that in Warhammer 3 at the moment. It's the most popular campaign. It's the best campaign. It's the most played campaign. And there's a lot of good reasons for it. Gelt suffers because his campaign ends up being too easy. We'll see with the Kala over there if we have to deal with Slaanesh, because she's going to eat magic users alive. But here's where things get really good for Gelt. See, he has choices. Beyond the inherent aspect of the Empire choices, he has his own choices with the Colleges of Magic. Now, the thing about the Colleges of Magic, it's not that you just get a bunch of wizards. It's how you use those wizards. So each school of magic ends up having its own choice. It's an individual cooldown you have for a specific action. So if you're Using compelled corrosion, for instance, I'm going to just do that right here, that just triggers that cooldown. The choice that you have in this dynamic is down to the fact of whether or not you want to spend arcane essays in order to get that specific effect. But it is a great choice because, one, you have a lot of arcane essays, so you're not in a situation, oh, I'll just use one action every couple of turns. No, you'll use multiple actions on the same turn. But the question is, when do you want to use it? Because these things won't necessarily last forever, and it depends on the army that you want to use it on. Because you can use it on a certain army, yes, but then you also have to consider the implications of how you want to use it, right? Like, do I want to put mass concealment with a 6-turn cooldown on Gelt's army here, or do I want to potentially summon a Grey Wizard for my second army and give them mass concealment, which gives them a stock stance and 100% ambush success chance. In this case, I'm just going to go with Gelt, but then I'll also spice it up because I don't have movement range anymore. And then with Gelt, I'm just going to take this army and I'm going to ambush these greenskins. And voila, this is how a proper choice is made. It's the combination of various effects put together that end up working well. Sure, auto-resolve being auto-resolve is a different discussion, but you understand the point. This is what makes Gelt work. All these different decisions, all at once, all using them. Now, I don't know how Teclis is going to play out. I'm hoping he ends up having a similar dynamic to that. But it's not just about this one thing that makes Gelt's campaign great. Yes, it can certainly be easy enough and abusable enough, some balanced decisions. But the thing is, Thrones of Decay may have balance problems in itself, but Thrones of Decay works because it gives you meaningful decisions that you're constantly making through a campaign. How many heroes do you want to make versus how many units? Because if you go full-on mage heroes, there can be weaknesses that even the AI will exploit. If you go full-on regular units, you're ignoring one of the core systems in the campaign. Also, I would like to say one of the lessons that should be learned from Gelt's campaign is that we really, really need automatic leveling for heroes and lords, because it's constantly annoying having a ton of heroes and then managing all of those individually in a campaign. Something that Creative Assembly has not fixed to this date. There are mods that do it, but they're imperfect. Like, just give me the ability of setting up a template for lords and heroes of how I want them to level. Because most of the time, and I'm sure most people will agree, most of the time when you're playing a campaign, you want to level things in a certain way. Like if I'm leveling a fire mage, a bright wizard, I'm always going to get fireball, I'm going to get kindle flame, I'm going to probably get the burning head, then evasion, then piercing bolts. Maybe I make some different decisions here and there dependent on the enemy that I'm playing against, but usually it's the same decisions all the time. Maybe a bit of a different order, but 90% of the time it is those similar decisions that we are making constantly. And that is how Creative Assembly should deal with that. Like, it's these kind of things in a campaign that really do matter. It's not having a bunch of unique units and having a bunch of unique mechanics that sells the idea of a campaign. It's the actual implementation of unique things. For instance, over here, I could use full-on replenishment for this army because I'm going to get a rebellion there. Maybe I do get a rebellion. Maybe I do let it happen. I just need the money right there. But it's about having resources and spending them, not limiting how many resources the player has on the idea that it provides some challenge. There's no challenge, boys and girls. Like, I've seen plenty of mods, I've seen plenty of games that have this idea that limiting resources and forcing the players to make things, quote-unquote, strategically or slower is creating choices. It's not that. Quite opposite. A great game, what it does is it gives you tons of decisions to make, tons of options available, but how you use those options is what defines that defines your playstyle, and you are forced to use those options in order to get ahead. This is the thing about Malachi. Malachi is a great campaign because, yes, you have a lot of power, but you actually use that power. It's also the thing that we see in Elden Ring. In Elden Ring, it's very easy to get very powerful. But then you encounter Malenia or Radagon, and they whoop your ass if you're not actually using the power that you have access to fairly easily. Don't even get me started on the DLC bosses of Elden Ring. So it is that kind of dynamic that makes a great game good. And it's why it's so irritating dealing with Total War, because you do have times in Total War, Thrones of Decay, other periods where Creative Assembly got this. They really did. But what I'm seeing from Tides of Torment, everything they've revealed, the Steam pages, the blogs, the videos, all that stuff, indicates to me that they're going down a bad path. And it's the kind of path we've seen before from CA Sofia, specifically with Troy. No, specifically with Pharaoh. Troy has actually done right. This may seem shocking, but Troy was done right. You had tons of options, tons of resources, tons of possibilities. Sure, some were better than others, myth units in particular, like who's going to go with, say, for instance, Harpies versus a Minotaur. Just an idea, right? Or, sorry, not Minotaurs, Giants, right? Harpies versus Giants. Giants are better, flat out better. So that's kind of the question. But you had a ton of resources, different decisions to make. Then you had Pharaoh, where it feels like, oh, let's just copy the idea of some modders, where it's like limiting what the player has available is a good design decision. It is not a good design decision, because when you limit your game, it ends up being crap. Why do you think Pharaoh was the worst old Total War game? It ain't because it had just battle problems or pricing issues. That is the thing. And funnily enough, the best way to play Pharaoh is actually giving yourself tons of resources through campaign customization, so you actually can use the systems the game has, as opposed to the significant limitation it has inherently. So you have two different styles. The style of plenty, which is how Gelt works, and everything that we've seen from Tides of Torment. That is where I stand. Costin, signing out.